Welcome to the Carmen Sense Realty Show.
A common sense approach to real estate.
Thank you, Carmen. I am your co-host, Kurt Schenk, otherwise known as Boomer. And here is the star of the show.
The star of the show, Carmen Lonardo.
Yep. And by the way, in my contract, I have to say that every opening of the show.
And 5 times throughout the next 30 minutes.
Because we get co-op on that, too.
Yep.
Our guest today is Nick Coco from NC Appraisal Services. Hi, Nick.
Good morning.
Welcome aboard the
Thanks
Carmen
for joining
Sense
us,
Realty
Nick.
Show.
Yep.
Yeah. First, Carmen, how do they get in touch with you, our viewers and listeners?
Very easy. Call or text my cell phone. That's 585-233-4119. Or, of course, you can email at carmen.lonardo@remax.net. But text is the easiest way.
Yep. You can find them on LinkedIn and Twitter and at carmensense.com.
And don't forget Carmen Lonardo and Associates on Facebook.
Thank you.
I'm out there.
I know you are. You're social media.
Way out there.
Yeah, God. So, yeah, you are way out there. Before we start, general state of real estate in our area. And, you know, I know you focus on Penfield, but, of course, you handle the county.
Oh, yeah, all over.
Yeah.
Like to stay close to home, living in Penfield. So I know quite a bit about the market there. That's an easy peasy kind of thing for me. But we list and sell all over Monroe County and outside of Monroe County, even in, places like Avon or Lima or Macedon, Walworth, wherever. The market is kind of churning along, at a steady pace, but, of course, at a slow pace because we're consistently seeing a low level of inventory. Mm-hmm. Rochester being one of the worst inventory markets nationwide. And that's fueled by many things. What we keep hearing is that interest rates are going to get knocked down a little bit again. So we are under 4%. Last I was talking to some of my banker friends, we were at about 3.75, 3.8. So it looks like I might even be 3.5. Who knows?
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah. That's
now
crazy
you said
money.
Worst inventory in the country yet, but didn't I see a report that said it's the best real estate market in the country?
Yeah, for affordability.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, but so now we're approaching August, and so typically the market takes a bit of a pause in August. People have made their purchasing decisions, prior to 4th of July or thereabouts. August, you see a lot of people taking their family vacations, taking a break from real estate and so forth. And that's when realtors catch up on their paperwork and, have a little downtime for ourselves and look forward to and start getting prepped for the fall market, which, post-Labor Day, they'll pick right up.
Will it?
Yeah.
And does it, hate to look ahead, I don't know how many days till Christmas, but by then, is it quiet again in December, or does it keep,
you'd think that it's quiet, but the market slows down a little bit after, the fall market is weather dependent, right? So if it starts to sleet and snow in the middle of October like it does sometimes, that tends to keep people inside and will slow the market down. But in the most recent past, we've had decent weather into, Thanksgiving, right?
Right.
And, the market kind of churns along. It's not uncommon for me to, sell a house between Thanksgiving Day and that following Monday.
Right.
People are in from out of town and want to take family members to go look at houses, or people are moving back into town and they're in town and want to look. And straight through into about the 20th of December. And then things kind of, slow down for the Christmas holiday and the New Year's and so forth. And then we pick right back up again.
Right.
Yep.
Well, that's what makes real estate so exciting. Right, Carmen?
Well, that and dealing with people and helping them reach their goals.
And that is true.
Yeah.
That is true from personal experience.
So we are the American dream experts is what we are.
beautiful.
Yeah, thank you. I made that up myself.
You're very talented, and please don't sing the jingle.
Well, is it time for the jingle?
No,
Can I
it
sing
is
the jingle?
not.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
I have a question for you. Do you feel that with all the buyers in waiting right now that maybe we won't see that lull in August that we typically do?
Well, we'll see. That's a good question and a good point. I guess it depends on what price market we're talking about. So, the 300 on up is kind of slow to begin with because there's not a lot of buyers there, and it depends on what comes on the market, right? So if there are properties that come on the market that are in that that affordability range, that under 300 range, then then things will stay busy. But we also see a decline in listings normally in August a little bit, so that just slow things down. But the demand of buyers, you're dead on. I mean, if there's something out there for sale, they're going to go buy it. So,
Absolutely.
And a great question from our studio audience, Nick Coco of NC Appraisal Services. Oh, the big bad appraiser
big
guy.
bad appraiser. Dun, dun, dun. Everybody is fearful of this appraisal stuff. And I've learned recently, particularly with Nick. We worked on a job together, and even in the past, he's helped out with a couple of appraisals that we had to contest. Appraisers aren't always the bad guy, right? They serve a very useful purpose, and they're very helpful. So hopefully, after our segment today, appraisers won't have such a bad name, right? Yeah, we'll see. Yeah.
Don't fail your fellow appraisers.
Just don't say too much, Nick.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So listen. So let's start with the basics. What is an appraisal, and why is and how is that different than a real estate agent going out and looking comps to price a house to sell?
We may be a little more specific than the real estate agents are. Most of the work that I do is for lenders in a purchase or refinance type of situation. And lenders like to see comparable sales within a 12-month period. That's most indicative of the market. But as you know, the market hasn't really changed too much within the last almost up to 36 months right now. We've had a very active market. And so basically I'm there for value, mostly to protect the lender, but sometimes what people don't know is I'm actually protecting the buyer too. You obviously don't want to pay too much for a house. Sometimes you get a little pushback from a buyer or a borrower. They think the house may be worth more. We haven't, as you know, a lot of things are selling over list price right now. Multiple offers is part of the reason for that. And we haven't had a lot of pushback from the lenders typically. In the past, what has happened is you say, well, why, if it's listed for, let's say, $100,000, is it selling for 110 or 115 or something like that? We haven't had a lot of pushback because they know what the market is right now. So as you know, we're getting a lot of multiple offers. It's been a little difficult to work with. And also back to the inventory thing, we're kind of drying up on the comparables within a 12-month period. So sometimes we are able to go back a little further. But basically we're there for value. We're there to protect the lender for the money that they're lending, but also to protect the buyer as well.
So we've seen recently over the last 3 or 4 cycles that we have a lot of cash buyers out there today. One of the more common things is that parents may be pulling equity out of their house so that their kids, their first-time home buyers, can go in with a cash offer or make their offer more appealing than a financed offer and, end up with the house. So what about these cash buyers? Are they getting appraisals done?
What we're finding with a lot of the cash buyers, as you say, is to make their offer more attractive because there are multiple offers right now. And a lot of times they'll turn around and within weeks go for a mortgage on that property. I've also had some where they went with a cash offer. They're going to pay cash, but in the interim, they applied for a mortgage. So sometimes I go to the realtor and I say, yeah, I'm there to do the appraisal. Oh, they're a cash buyer. I think they're going for a mortgage as well. It's got nothing to do with the contract that you have right now. So I think you're seeing a lot of cash buyers just because people are up against multiple offers. They're trying to make their offer more attractive.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure you're seeing that as well.
Yeah, that's interesting. Before this inventory mess kind of came on us, probably 6 or 7 years ago, there was a place over on Park Avenue, a duplex, where a woman came in with a cash offer. And, I got a call, a couple weeks into the deal from someone wanting to do an appraisal. And I said, sure, fine. And well, wait a minute. Appraisal for what? And as it turned out, she was going to finance this thing, and it ended up being a bit of a sticky wicket because, what happens now if it doesn't appraise? Is the buyer going to walk? Is the buyer going to try to renegotiate the deal? Right.
Which, of course, they have the right to do.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, they don't.
They don't
because it
with
wasn't
the cash offer.
Yeah, it wasn't contingent on financing. And, one of the things that I've seen lately, and this is why I asked the question, cash buyers do have and are starting to make their cash offer contingent on an appraisal.
It happens. It's not happening as much as you would think.
Yeah.
It probably should.
Right.
But it's not. Buyers, as you know, they tend to do it with the internet and everything. They tend to do their own homework right now. They're not as dependent upon, and I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying that they're doing it correctly. There seems to be, right now, this idea out there, well, I'm going to pay X amount of dollars per square foot. It's really got nothing to do with anything.
Mm-hmm.
So I haven't seen a whole lot of people doing that where they're cash, but then they want that comfort of having the appraisal to make sure they're paying what they should be.
Right.
Probably should be more though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the appraisal gets done. The bank is making that a requirement for the buyer. It makes the buyer pay for the appraisal. So does the appraiser work for the bank? Are you a bank employee?
We're independents. We actually go through management companies. That all changed, I want to say about 2008, where the lenders would directly order the appraisal. But with the little housing crisis that we had back in 2008, the decision was that maybe there should be somebody in the middle.
Right.
And so therefore there's not that communication between the bank and the appraiser.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, sometimes there's a communication breakdown because we're going through another party and sometimes things get lost in the translation.
Right.
But so we're all independents pretty much. There are staff appraisers. I don't, in certain parts of the country, probably more so than here. But there are some people that have staff appraisers. I can't name them. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. So when they changed that, when they introduced that third party, it's been going on now for almost 10 years, right? Since they
maybe a little bit longer, yeah, about 2008.
Do you think that's cleaned up the process? Has it been beneficial overall? Or?
It's been beneficial. Yeah. I think so. I think, it's a little more hands-off.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes I'll leave it at that.
Okay.
I'll leave it at that. I think there's a different mindset amongst appraisers.
Right.
They may have a little more. They may be thinking more along the independent line. I don't have to please somebody at the bank anymore in order to get business.
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'll end it there.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So let's talk a little bit about different housing styles. From an agent standpoint, what's always been a little difficult to get my arms around is how sometimes appraisers will look at split levels and raised ranches. differently, and they'll look at the above grade square footage, but won't include the below grade or the partially below grade square footage, even though it's clearly living space. Give us your take on that a little bit.
I do FHA and VA appraisals as well. They do not like to see you using anything below grade, like to treat that as a basement. Using the raised ranch with a split level, they both exhibit the same market appeal. The layout is kind of the same.
Right.
So they have the same market appeal. So a lot of times if I am dealing with either one of those styles and I have a shortage of either splits or raised ranches, and I'm doing one of those, I will go to the other style because it's the same market appeal, I believe.
Right.
Now, as you know, right now, ranches themselves are at a premium.
Sure.
We have an older population, and people are going for ranches. And as you see, many of the builders have gone to just building ranches or patio homes or semi-attached units that are ranch styles. So that's a totally different thing. I know that in the past you had a question regarding a ranch versus a raised ranch.
Right.
Can that be the same? Sure. But a lot of times people won't go for that.
Right.
Yeah, they'll go, a ranch in itself is something different. So style, I always like to stick with the same style. It's very important. I think that's the same market appeal, and that's what you should have. Same thing as if you have, for instance, a house with an in-ground pool. Do you want comparables with in-ground pools? Sure. That's the market appeal.
Right.
So, yeah, along those lines, sometimes that's a big question. Why we don't use the lower level? You're right. Clearly it's living space. Sometimes you have a walkout or something like that.
Right.
It's
I was
living
going to say
space.
a finished basement, for instance.
Right.
Yeah.
So, yeah, is it living space? The lenders don't like to see it. So we kind of back off of that.
Yeah, it's interesting because there was one case in particular just last year that we kibitzed on a little bit, and it was a raised ranch, and from the facade, the basement windows, or I should say the lower level windows, were partially above grade, but from the back, it was at grade. So the entry door was at grade. So there was a bit of a hill in the front, and very clearly that lower level was living space. All of the square footage was in the tax records, and this family was being taxed, at all of the square footage being living space. But yet the appraiser would not count that below grade space.
Sometimes with a raised ranch, you'll have 2 bedrooms up, 2 bedrooms down.
Right.
So that, of course, is living space, and it's very important, and especially if you have a walkout or something like that. As long as you treat everything the same. So if you're doing, let's say, a raised ranch, and you want to use both levels, that's fine. Okay? But you have to do it with all your comparables as well.
Right.
So and I think that sometimes, that's fine to do it that way. I've seen, I do a lot of appraisal review as well, and I've seen that before, and it's perfectly acceptable.
So would you recommend that somebody listing their home for sale do an appraisal before they list it?
I think that you guys, as real estate agents, do know the market pretty well, but sometimes you get that oddball property. It's out in a rural area. It's a little bit different function. I think that might be important for somebody to do it in that regard. And I've done a lot. I get calls from real estate agents a lot. Where they will ask, I got an oddball property. I don't know what's going to be real usable square footage when it comes to appraisal time. If we sell it, what can we do? So, yeah, I mean, you guys know the market pretty well.
Right.
There's no doubt about it. But I think that if you want to stay along the lines of what the appraiser is going to be looking at later on, after you get a sale on the property, stick within the 12 months, try and get in proximity, try and get the same square footage, try and get the same amenities, condition,
Right.
et cetera.
I think back to the property in Penfield that we recently worked on, and the sellers questioned the value that I pegged on the home, and I offered them the ability to do an appraisal, and they did. And I'm glad that they did, because we ended up listing it for a much higher price. I was going off of the square footage that was in the public records, and come to find out that it appeared as if an enclosed porch was included, but in fact it wasn't. It was listed, but it wasn't included in the square footage. So it was almost 300 square foot less, right? So we went from a list price of 155 to a list price of 175. I mean, a big difference.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We measure every property, and a lot of times people say, "Why are you measuring?" And here's what it is. And we actually do a floor plan sketch is included with every appraisal, and we have to verify. When we pull up a public record, we have to verify everything. You'd be surprised how many discrepancies you find, especially with square footage. So we verify everything as far as the square footage goes, the amenities, and that type of thing. And that's the reason why. I mean, you got to realize that nobody's letting the assessor in the house.
Right.
So some of the assessment records are old. Some of newer houses, they have an actual building plan, so they say, okay, this is exactly what it is. Not always true, though. You know that. You might have somebody building a house, and they say, can you bump this out?
Right.
Well, it's within code, and the builder says, sure, for X amount of dollars, I will.
Sure.
So it may not end up in the town's records exactly as the way it was, or it may be a reverse plan or something like these. So that's why we verify it.
And it makes a difference.
Oh, it does make a
little
difference,
bit. A little bit of square footage makes a big difference in the price.
It absolutely does.
Yeah.
Do people contest appraisals?
They do. And the process for contesting an appraisal is, well, show us some comparables that we might have missed. So sometimes do you miss something? Sure. I had one recently that I did down in Canandaigua Lake, and I missed it because they had a private sale, which was brand new. So in between the weeks, or I should say week and a half from when I completed the appraisal, it now became public record, that other sale. And I said, sure, bring it, and I'll use it.
Sure.
And it brought it up 10, 15 million after that,
Do you use the for sale by owners as comps when you can't?
I don't.
You don't.
No, I don't. I feel like they've had no advice. Probably they might have.
Right.
But they might have been using a real estate agent to say, this is what it's worth, and then they go for sale by owner. We do use. You have to realize that if we don't find it, mostly we use the multiple listing service, the MLS, and if we can't find something, right there, we will go to public records. Rock Docs is one that we use a lot, that I use in Rochester. I also, what I will do is I'll pull up not only what has sold on the street most recently, but what has sold on the street within the last bunch of years. And then I'll go to Rock Docs and plug in the street as well to see if anything's in there.
Right.
Because sometimes you get a private sale. But private sale, you have to do a little detective work, because it may be a non-arm's length sale, selling to a family member, something along these lines, extenuating circumstances. So you have to do a little detective work on those.
$1 for the house really wasn't the real value.
Yeah, right. The dollar was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good.
So.
I want to ask you about FHA and VA. So you said that you're qualified, certified. I forget the term that you used.
Certified both. Yeah.
Certified to do FHA and VA appraisals. Yes. So why are they different? How are they different than conventional?
The funding is different. As far as the appraisal goes, not a whole lot different. I think there's a misconception out there that it's really that perhaps it's a little more stringent, but that's not always true. We over the years, it's kind of become a level ground. But there are a couple things, safety issues, that are a little more strict with the VA and FHA, peeling paint, handrails. You know this.
Right.
Yeah. Those are some of the things that we look at a
Smoke
little
detectors,
bit
carbon monoxide
more.
detectors.
Yes. Yeah. Well, actually, we don't deal with that a whole lot because now New York State requires an affidavit for that. So we assume that they're going to be in there because I don't think you can really close without it right now.
Yeah. What about this business of staining in attic structure? You know, on the wood, on the plywood, on the rafters, and the fear of mold. How does that impact your job?
I want to let you know that we don't do a whole lot on that just because we're not qualified. So we're there more for value. We don't get into latent conditions like that, which is why, and you probably do, you probably advise people to get a home inspection.
Yeah.
And it's important. I think you should.
Right.
I think right now a lot of people are foregoing the home inspection because they're up against multiple offers, right? And they say, we won't get the home inspection. Is that a mistake? It might be.
Yeah. It takes
down the road.
for the seller, it takes a variable out that's, it's an unknown, right?
Right.
Because you don't know what's going to happen. Because it isn't simply that buyer does an inspection and they can, show up with a litany of repairs that need to be made. I mean, that certainly is one of the risks. But technically the buyer could just say, I no longer want the house.
Right.
And end the story, right? It's just not in the condition that I want it in, and see you later.
For FHA and VA, we do have to inspect the attic area. So even if it's a scuttle, we have to get, we don't necessarily get up there because sometimes it's unsafe to get up there, but you do go up there and you do take some photos. If I see something that I think is a little off, same thing as if I see a roof that might be at the end of its economic life. I'm not an expert, but I will note in the appraisal itself, the roof may be at the end of its economic life. You might want to get a roofer in there, a certified roofer in there to find out, or license, whatever you want to call it, to get in there and do an inspection on it.
Yeah.
So if you see something along the lines that you think is mold, I'm not a mold expert, obviously.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So we don't get too much, at least I don't get too much of this, but probably do one or two deals a year that are USDA. So same thing applies, USDA, VA.
They're
FHA.
treated a lot like an FHA.
Yeah.
Exactly the same, as a matter of fact. Yeah,
Okay.
they are. Great program.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really is.
Interesting twist. We'll talk a little bit about the Coco family now. So Marie, your spouse, your wife, is a loan officer.
Yes.
And I can't mention the name,
No.
but Canandaigua National Bank, I think,
Yeah,
is
CNB.
CNB. So she does residential lending, has been doing residential lending for many, many, many years now. So tell us about the dinner table. You guys ever squabble about appraisals and what happens with loans?
Well, I obviously don't do anything along the lines of her business.
Yeah.
Can't touch it just because of the relationship that we have. The dinner table has a lot of there's a lot of beeps in there, but it's nice because we're able to, because we're in the same industry, we're able to share a lot along those lines. But the appraisal questions come up. Should this be going on? Should that be going on? And of course, the lender questions come up because I have some jargon in my appraisals that deal with the actual lending process. So I always like to keep up on that, which is important. And she likes to keep up on the appraisal process.
Right.
How long have you been doing what you're doing?
20 years.
20 years.
Yeah.
And how did it just start as your own company?
No.
The get-go?
No, I was selling real estate prior to that.
Okay.
And one of my friends, one of my buddies there that sold real estate, got into the appraisal business. And a couple of years later, he was looking for, he got quite busy, and he was looking for somebody to give him some help. And I said, I had taken, as part of continuing education, an appraisal course with real estate. It kind of interested me a little bit. So I said, sure. I said, I don't know how much time I can give you, but that's fine. And I ended up really liking it. So I ended up taking the classes and the apprenticeship. You have to do an apprenticeship. And then I went out on my own about 9 years ago. So, yeah.
Wow.
How are appraisers compensated?
There's an appraisal fee that the buyer or borrower pays to the bank. Now, because of the management companies now, they get a little piece of the pie because they're handing it out to us. So they get a piece of it, and we're paid the net off of that, I guess you might say. Yeah.
Okay.
So how close are we to?
We're getting close to wrapping up. So,
kind of just want to ask an unrelated question. I listen to a lot of interviews and podcasts myself, and everybody seems to do this really neat thing towards the end. And it's not our neat thing, right?
No.
I think we sort of have a trademark on that.
We do. So where are you going with
and
this?
the jingle that you won't let me sing.
Do not sing the jingle.
You can't sing the jingle. That could
We'll
get
get
us in
Alyssa
trouble.
to do that, maybe.
Okay. Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Alyssa
So
Coco, fine vocalist.
yeah. So you're home, you're channel surfing, and you land on a movie that you've seen over and over and over and over again, and you stop everything, put the brakes on, you gotta watch it. What movie is it?
Two that I've seen in the last week that I haven't seen in a while, but I've seen several times. One, which I understand there's going to be a sequel soon, Coming to America.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And the other was, of course, My Cousin Vinny.
My Cousin
You really can't change the channel. You know every line, but
Right.
So those would be the two.
Good.
That I
Good,
saw
good.
within the last week or so.
Excellent. Good job. And Kurt?
What, me?
Yeah, you.
Movies that I've seen recently
That
that I
you
haven't.
just like stop the channel. Yeah, you stop what you're doing because you got to watch it.
Face Off.
Face Off.
Yeah, I'm watching a lot of streaming stuff now. I'm not watching full length movies as I used to.
Right. Yeah.
So, Schitt's Creek is one of my favorite shows now, and stuff like that. My viewing habits aren't the same as they were even a year ago.
Yeah.
Because we blew up cable, DirecTV. I just have YouTube TV and streaming now, and that's how we're doing.
Yeah, I
that.
just recently cut the cord myself.
It's crazy, man.
Yeah.
Okay, and now it's time for Carmen Cooks.
Woohoo! That's the best part of the show. A little tidbit for today. It's not really a tidbit. It's just something to talk about. I like to cook. I know Nick likes to cook, and I think Kurt tries to cook. Right? This is an easy one. It's boiling water for pasta. Right? Everybody's you got to boil water for pasta. So, do you salt the water or do you not salt the water?
I do not, Nick.
In my house, it's salted.
It's salted.
Right.
And is there a benefit, do we think, to salting or not salting?
I heard it keeps pasta from clinging together. That's what I heard.
I've heard that with olive oil, putting olive oil in the water.
Okay, so maybe I'm confusing those two.
I think you are.
Okay, fine.
They're not even similar substances, but that's all right.
You did better in chemistry than I did.
I think I took 10 days of chemistry and then withdrew from the class
And apparently not.
and enrolled in band or something like that.
Smart move.
Yeah.
So anyway, what's
well, what I've heard is that it doesn't necessarily impart a salty flavor to the pasta that you're boiling, but because it's an impurity in the water, it raises the boiling point of the water, so the water boils at a higher temperature, and so the pasta cooks faster.
That makes sense. Yeah, salt does increase.
Makes
the
Carmen
temperature
sense, doesn't it?
That's total Carmen sense.
But now, of course, everyone's using pasta water.
Pasta water.
Yeah, in there. And reserve that pasta water
for sauces. Yeah, that's a good one. Good one. One last thing. It's not a Carmen Cook thing, but we've got this magazine that is available for your asking. It's Selling Your Home. And there are several pages on the inside that tell you how wonderful I am, but there is lots of useful stuff too. Towards the back, there are things to do when you list your house for sale. Room by room checklist, and then also there it is, perfect. And then there's also a checklist of things to do once your home is under contract, so that it's not the 11th hour and you realize you're closing next week and you still got to move all your stuff out.
Right, including your children.
But one thing, as a pre-list thing, on the first page, if you'll open that up so people can see it, second page, there is my list of pros, my team of pros, and these people around the circle there are all vendors that they paint, they clean, they do landscaping, carpentry, they fix plumbing, they install heating, ventilation, air conditioning systems. There are lenders on there. Nick's on there as an appraiser. So if you need some services as you are preparing your home for sale, this is a good resource. And you can get this simply by asking. Just give me a call or a text at 585-233-4119, and be happy to send you a PDF to your email address or a hard copy to your U.S. mail address.
Easy peasy.
Easy peasy, lemon squeezy.
Nick Coco from NC Appraisal Services. How do we get in touch with you?
Text is probably the best way. It's 585-721-2626. The 2626 spells Coco.
Wow, that's clever.
Wow.
You guys are just awesome. 585-721-COCO.
So you changed your name so it would match the phone number.
Right, exactly.
2626. And finally, Carmen, how do people reach you in totality? What do we say?
585-233-4119 or email carmen.lonardo@remax.net.
Great. And you can find me, Kurt Schenk, a.k.a. Boomer, on LinkedIn and Facebook at The Right Creative. Like to thank Fitz at Rockbox today. If you're going to do a podcast in Rochester, this is the place to do it.
Yeah, fabulous.
Yeah.
Great stuff.
Fitz is the best. I'm Kurt Boomer Schenk from The Right Creative. You can find me on LinkedIn and Facebook at The Right Creative. And Carmen Lonardo of Carmen Sense Realty.
Common sense approach to real estate.